Chapter 34, The Cost. For 3 days Ethan lived in a feverish dark, and the dark had a texture he had never felt before: emptiness. He surfaced and sank, through a haze of hospital sounds and his mother's voice, and the cold scraped hollow where the coal had been. That was the strangeness of it, the thing that frightened him even half-conscious. Not the weakness of the body, though the body was weak, wrung out and trembling and useless. It was the emptiness at the center of him. For 5 years there had been a warmth behind his breath, a banked coal he could find on the first reach, a constant. Now there was nothing. He had poured every thread of it out onto a flooded road in a single instant, and the place where it had lived was a raw, scraped void, and reaching for it brought back only the ache of torn channels and a cold that had no bottom. He had known there would be a cost. He had not known it would feel like having a piece of his soul scooped out. The body paid in its own coin, and the doctors could not read the currency. He was weak in a way no 7-year-old should be, could barely lift his head the first day, could not hold a cup the second, slept 18 hours and woke exhausted. His temperature swung. His small frame, which had channeled a flood it was never built to carry, ached deep in places that had no name on any chart. And the doctors, running their tests, found nothing. No injury from the truck, he'd not been touched. No illness, no infection, no deficiency, no seizure, nothing. A healthy boy had collapsed into a senseless dark on a morning of high stress, and would not bounce back the way a healthy boy should, and there was no cause in any of their books, because the cause was the overdraw of a power that did not officially exist. Ethan heard them, surfacing and sinking, heard the careful, baffled voices, the word exhaustion, the word stress, the phrase "we're not seeing anything, Mr. and Mrs. Cole, which is good, but we'd like to keep him for observation." He heard the fear under his mother's questions and the strange new rawness in his father's voice, and he understood, even through the haze, that he had a problem, and that the problem was exactly the one he had spent 5 years building his whole life to avoid. He was visible. He was a mystery in a hospital, a healthy child with an inexplicable collapse, surrounded by trained people whose entire job was to find causes, and attached, in the minds of everyone present, to a second inexplicable thing: a man who had walked away from a crash he should not have survived. 2 mysteries on the same morning, in the same family. It was exactly the kind of pattern the second rule existed to prevent, and Ethan had created it himself, with his own hands, to save his father, and he would do it again without hesitation, but that did not make it any less dangerous now. By the 3rd day he surfaced enough to think, and as soon as he could think, he went to work on the story. This was the part of him that never fully slept, the cold, careful planner, the man inside the boy, and even wrung out and hollow and aching, it took stock and began to steer. The truth could never be spoken. So the story had to be ordinary, had to give the baffled adults a shape they could accept and stop looking past. And the shape was already half-built, handed to him by the doctors themselves, a sensitive, sensible little boy, overwhelmed. He had only to lean into it. So when he finally woke fully, to his mother's face crumpling with relief, to his father's big hand closing around his small one too hard, Ethan gave them the ordinary boy. He was tired and frightened and small. He didn't remember much, he said, voice weak. The truck was scary, the water was scary. He got so scared he felt sick and everything went black. He pieced it deliberately into the doctor's own language. a scared little boy who'd worked himself into a state and fainted from the fright of a near crash. A story with no power in it, no foreknowledge, no mystery, just a sensitive child and a frightening morning, and a faint that the body, in its own time, would recover from. He made himself the smallest, most explicable version of what had happened, and he watched the adults reach for it gratefully, because a frightened fainting boy was a thing they could understand, and a thing they could stop worrying about. It was not a perfect berry. His father's eyes, when they rested on him, held something that the story did not quite smooth away. A question, a wondering, a memory of a calm that did not fit a frightened faint. Ethan saw it and filed it, and knew he would have to tend to it carefully in the weeks to come. But the worst of the visibility, the medical mystery, the hospitals searching that, the ordinary story closed. The tests came back clean. The boy woke and talked and was plainly only weak and tired, and the machinery of concern began slowly to stand down. That night, alone in the dim hospital room with his family finally gone home to sleep, Ethan lay in the emptiness and counted the true cost, the way he counted everything. He had paid in 3 currencies. The body wrung out but young, it would mend. The power, every thread of it spent, the coals scraped to nothing, the channels torn. That, too, would mend, he hoped, though he did not yet know how long it would take to grow back what 5 years had built, or whether it would grow back the same. And the secret, bruised, strained, very nearly broken. He had created 2 mysteries on one morning and spent everything he had to bury them back to ordinary, and the bury had mostly held, but mostly was not the perfect invisibility he had lived inside for 5 years, and his father's wondering eyes were proof that a crack had opened that he would have to spend months sealing shut. It was a heavy price. He looked at the whole of it, unflinching in the dim and empty dark. And he found, looking at it, that he would have paid it 10 times over. Because against all 3 currencies, the wrung body, the spent power, the bruised secret, stood the one fact that outweighed every cost there could ever be. His father was alive. David Cole had carried his son into this hospital, instead of being carried out of a morgue. Susan would not become the widow at the window. Emma would have a father. The whole ruined first life, the long gray aftermath of the wet road, simply would not happen now. He had spent everything, and he had bought the only thing he had ever truly wanted, and it was worth it, and it would always be worth it. Ethan closed his eyes in the empty dark, weak and hollow and at peace, and let the young body begin, slowly, the long work of mending the body, and the power, and the secret, all 3, while somewhere across the sleeping city his living father lay awake, turning over a question he would never be able to answer.